Welcome to a special edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. Thanks for being with us as always. There will be no phone calls today as we continue our look ahead to the Giants' regular season schedule. Now, today we preview the Baltimore Ravens. They'll play the Giants in Week 15, that is December 15th at MetLife Stadium. And to do so, we bring in beat reporter Cordell Woodland of 105.7 The Fan in Baltimore. Cordell, great to talk to you today. And man, you are covering a team that has been to the playoffs in five of the last 6 seasons now.
Yeah, it's kind of expected here in Baltimore when it comes to the Ravens. And, the thought is as long as Lamar Jackson, two-time MVP, is healthy and on his feet, the Ravens have a shot at this thing. We've seen them even back into the playoffs when Lamar was hurt and not there. They've made it with backup Tyler Huntley, at least backup at the time. So this is a really good team, and this is a team that's coming off of an offseason with a lot of roster turnover, a lot of coaching turnover, and front office turnover as well. So a lot of questions surrounding this team, but still very talented, and their core is still very young, and they have a ton of elite players on both sides of the ball.
Well, you mentioned a lot of the turnover. Let's look at for a second the fact that they're coming off a 13-4 season, went to the AFC Championship game before falling to Kansas City, and yet we have seen some significant turnover upstairs. What is the one biggest change that you think we'll see based off of some of those maneuvers?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about the Ravens is they have the Ravens way. People come and go, but a lot of their philosophies don't change. They people come in and they put their fingerprints on things, but the Ravens have a standard and they have a certain way that they're going to go about things. So they lose Joe Ortiz, who was assistant GM to Eric DaCosta. He goes to the Los Angeles Chargers. And really, Ortiz was kind of one of the main guys that helped orchestrate the draft, that helped run the draft and everything. So losing him was a big blow, especially that time of year. But Eric DaCosta is kind of the guy that is has the last say when it comes to the draft decisions, when it comes to personnel decisions. Anyway, so I don't think a lot has necessarily changed upstairs. In terms of the coaching turnover, though, I mean, defensively, that's where a lot of it happened. They lose defensive coordinator Mike Macdonald, who takes the head coaching job in Seattle. In my opinion, Mike Macdonald was the best defensive coordinator in football. So there are going to be some changes there. Zach Orr, a former player for the Ravens, former linebacker, he was the linebackers coach. He gets promoted to a defensive coordinator, but they lose their secondary coach. They lose their defensive line coach as well. So quite a few moving pieces over there. I'm curious to see how it goes, but from talking to the guys and talking to John Harbaugh, it does, again, seem like the Ravens' defensive scheme, defensive philosophy, that's something that's been built up over time. It's not like Mike Macdonald came in, created it, and it left with him. He was one of kind of the authors of the book. So we'll see what Zach Orr is able to do, because the one thing Mike Macdonald was great at was in-game adjustments. I think he was the best in-game adjuster maybe in the league. So we'll see what Zach Orr does in that department, but I think defensively is probably where you're going to see maybe them not look as good as they did last year.
And of course, John Harbaugh seems like he has been there for like a millennium. And so that's good. That's the one sure constant. The big headline grabbing change on the roster, though, is Derrick Henry, who has led the NFL in carries in 4 of the last 5 years as they have reworked the running back room. Do you expect him to be the type of bell cow that he's been with the Titans over the years? Or is it going to be a little bit of pulling back on the chains with him as they maybe distribute some carries to other guys?
Yeah, I would expect there to be a natural decline in Derrick Henry's carries. I don't expect him to lead the NFL in carries again. I don't expect him to be top 3 in the carries. We'll see, though. I could be wrong about the top 3. I'd be absolutely shocked if he's leading the league in carries. But with Lamar Jackson there, I mean, some of that is going to go down. Lamar has led this team in rushing every year as a starter. I'm curious to see if that streak ends with Derrick Henry there. But I think both of these guys are going to take stuff off of each other's plate. I think they're going to help each other out in a big way. Lamar Jackson, I think while the Ravens have had historic rushing attacks during his time here, I think, what's lost in that is that it's been heavily linked. He's been the one that's been heavily leaned on to lead that rushing attack. It's not like the running backs have led the charge, and they've had solid running backs. Gus Edwards was really good during his time here. J.K. Dobbins, when healthy, was good. Mark Ingram had a Pro Bowl season here as well, and Justice Hill, who's still here, has been a weapon for them. But I just think that Lamar Jackson is the kind of the straw that stirs the drink for this running game, and I don't think that's going to change. I do think he and Derrick Henry will be able to help each other out in terms of how defenses play them, because God knows if a defense makes the wrong decision on one of those read options or RPOs, you don't know how far that play is going to go. So I expect Henry to be maybe more efficient than maybe we've seen him be at times in his career, but I do expect his usage to go down.
I can only imagine you put him and Patrick Ricard back there, the beast in the backfield. How is anyone going to stop a short yardage situation if those two guys are charging the line?
Yeah, it's going to be a problem. It's definitely going to be a problem. I mean, you would imagine that in the Ravens' mind offensively, just get to third and manageable. Just get some 3rd and 2s, 3rd and 3s, and it's kind of easy money. Red zone should be easy. When you talk about having a guy like Derrick Henry, that's an automatic power pusher. Then you put Patrick Ricard in there, like you mentioned. I mean, Patrick Ricard is one of the better football players in the league. He can do so many things that don't show up on the stat sheet. He's not going to, make ESPN Sports in the top plays or anything like that. But man, this dude, when you talk about getting your run game ready, and last year, as we saw, because the Ravens were dealing with offensive line issues, he was asked to help in some of the pass protection as well. So he does whatever they asked him to do. And he and Derrick Henry are like two bowling balls coming down at you. So the Ravens, the thought is they're going to be more under center a little bit more this year to kind of go along with what Derrick Henry is used to, but they're still going to be in shotgun. They're still going to be in pistol. So Patrick Ricard will be in on those times as well. And again, you'll have the threat of Lamar Jackson keeping the ball in some of the run game. Defenses are going to have to be on their toes facing the Ravens.
Does Justice Hill still have a 3rd down role on this team, do you think?
I would say so. Minicamp just wrapped up, and Justice Hill was still out there for a lot of their 3rd down reps. He'll still, I think, in passing situations on 3rd down, or maybe even 2nd and long, something like that, I wouldn't be shocked to see Justice Hill out there. They really like Justice Hill, and so do I. I mean, he's as dependable as any player on this team. He's fought through injuries in the past. He's worked his way back. He's always there whenever they have anything voluntary or mandatory. And when given his opportunity, he has flourished. He's been an efficient runner in this offense. He's been a great special teamer for them. So I think they love Justice Hill, and I would definitely look for Justice Hill to be a part of what the Ravens do this year.
Now, the acquisition of Henry, I'm curious as to your perspective on it, because we know that Lamar Jackson, the 2-time MVP, as you mentioned, both of those years he threw for over 3,000 yards, which he hadn't done in his other years. He's run for over 700 yards in each year of his career. Do you think that Henry's acquisition wasn't just about playing bully ball, but also to try to make sure that Lamar does not have to run as much to try to keep him healthy and to allow him to do more things in the passing game?
Yeah, I mean, I do think Derrick Henry is there to help them be more versatile in the run game. I don't think that they want to take away the threat of what Lamar Jackson does as a runner, because it's his superpower. It's his best superpower out of having many, and so I do think that they just, you look at the Ravens and where they fall short in the postseason, and you look at some of the common factors, it's due to them kind of abandoning the run game, them deciding to try to be something that they're not. It was a big deal over the offseason here in Baltimore about the fact that the Ravens only gave their running backs in total 6 carries in the AFC Championship game. That's just not going to fly. And you think back to the 2019 season where Lamar won MVP and the Ravens were 14-2, and then they lose in the divisional round, their first playoff game to the Titans, Derrick Henry's team at the time. They abandoned the running in that game as well, and they were the best rushing attack in the NFL. So in a way, I think Derrick Henry is here to kind of save John Harbaugh and these guys from themselves. I think he's here for the postseason, and it's a constant reminder to continue to do what you do best. I don't think that, they want to take Lamar out of the run game. Sure, they don't want him to be leaned on as much, but I do think they still want him to do that. I don't think that they're afraid of Lamar as a runner and, the threat of him getting injured, because he's been so good at protecting himself. He's gotten injured, but all of those injuries have been, in the pocket as he's trying to pass the ball. Lamar, I think, has really been good about protecting himself. You notice he always falls forward, never ends up on the back. So he knows how to finish runs, which is a quality most quarterbacks don't have. So I understand people getting nervous when they see him take off, but I do think they want to continue to let him be who he is.
And Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews will continue to be his favorite passing targets, obviously.
Yeah, I would assume so. And you can throw Isaiah Likely in there as well. Isaiah Likely has had maybe the most impressive offseason out of any of these offensive guys to this point. I mean, every day it's been a wow moment. And it's taken me back to his rookie year, where a lot of people didn't know about him until maybe that preseason game against the Cardinals, where he had over 100 yards receiving in the first half with Tyler Huntley throwing him the ball. And Mark Andrews got hurt that year, and Isaiah Likely looked great in Mark Andrews' absence. Same thing last year when Mark Andrews went down for a big chunk of the season. Isaiah Likely was incredible for the Ravens. So the key is, how are they going to get Likely and Andrews to both make an impact while they're on the field together? That's been Todd Monken's homework over the course of the offseason. And you mentioned Zay Flowers. They've been raving about Rashad Bateman, who had his best day of camp on the last day of mini camp yesterday. So Lamar has some weapons, but no doubt about it, Mark Andrews and Zay Flowers, like you mentioned, those are going to be his two favorite targets. But I would definitely look for Isaiah Likely to get himself a piece of the pie as well.
And Stanley and Linderbaum anchor that offensive line. They got other changes going on there, but I suspect with the power running game, that may not be as much of a problem, because it doesn't take a lot to just push Derrick Henry forward.
Yeah. He does a lot of that himself, it feels like. But, the thing is that Titans offensive line started to decline over the last few years. And I think you started to see a little bit of that impact Derrick Henry. As great as he is, as great as Henry is, I don't think he's above needing somebody to block for him. And the Ravens, like you said, they do have changes. Linderbaum and Stanley, they're the two staples right now, but those other three spots are going to be moving pieces. They lost Morgan Moses and John Simpson to the Jets this offseason. And their other guard ended up being a free agent, Kevin Zeitler, who you guys are familiar with. So he ends up going into free agency. So they bring in Andrew Voorhees, who had a red shirt year last year. They draft him late in the draft last season. He got hurt during his pro day. But I think it's looking like he may be a shoe-in at least one of these guard spots. So the right tackle and the other guard spot are kind of the things that are open. And Stanley, he's coming off of a down year himself last year. He's in a situation where he needs to prove that he can still play at this level. So I'm curious to see what type of year Stanley has, but he's been there at everything the Ravens have done to this point this offseason, and he's looked good. And Tyler Linderbaum, I just think he's getting better and better. He's going into this is his third year. He's already, I think, one of the top centers in the NFL. So they do have the good staples in terms of their center and their left tackle, but definitely some questions along the offensive line. And look, that'll be where having guys like Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson start to really help you out, because you're going to need some guys to maybe create some things on their own.
Cordell, before we get to defense, we remind our fans you can check out the Giants Huddle podcast with all kinds of long-form interviews with Giants personnel and folks around the league. Giants season ticket memberships are available. Go to giants.com/tickets. That's for the 2024 season. And Giants TV is the official connected streaming app with original video content free on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, and the Giants mobile app. Cordell, let's flop to defense. Justin Madubuike, bust-out season, 13 sacks last year up front. Roquan Smith at the linebacker level. Kyle Hamilton at the safety level. You got a big star at each one of those levels, although Patrick Queen isn't there anymore at the linebacker spot. How about a thumbnail sketch as to how you think this defense is going to come together?
Yeah, they were so good last year. You go into the offseason after having a year where you're the Triple Crown winner, you're leading the league in points allowed. And they were the sacks as well. I think they led the league in sacks last year as well. It's only natural that you're not going to probably be able to keep up that type of level in the next season. But then you combine that with them losing Mike McDonald, them losing their defensive line coach, they lose their DB coach. Their secondary was so good last year, despite injuries to guys like Marcus Williams and Marlon Humphrey. They still were able to have a standout year. And they lose personnel like you said, Patrick Queen, Jadeveon Clowney was second on this team in sacks. They lose him to Carolina. And so you are wondering what's going to happen. But I like you mentioned, they've got a star on every level, and it's up the middle. Madubuike right up there in the defensive tackle, Roquan Smith, middle linebacker, and Kyle Hamilton is kind of the ultimate chess piece. He moves everywhere. He's the nickel corner one play. He might be outside linebacker. He may play deep safety. You just don't know where Kyle Hamilton's going to be, but just know wherever he's at, he's going to make an impact. So I do think this Ravens defense will still be good. I'd be shocked if they're not a top 5 defense again. Maybe not the best defense in the league, but they have the potential to still be that because their star players are elite in that level. The question will be, can they get to the quarterback again? Questions around this pass rush still with Odafe Owe and David Ojabo, still young guys that are still looking to prove themselves. What impact will it be without Jadeveon Clowney being there? Can Kyle Van Noy and Madubuike have the years that they had last year? We'll see. Can Marlon stay healthy? So a lot of questions about this team, but the talent is definitely still there.
Yeah, Van Noy's been an overachiever his whole career. Every time he makes a pit stop, he seems to wind up coming up with a productive season, and people shake their heads, but he keeps doing it.
Yeah, and last year, he was signed after the season had started, and you wouldn't be able to know that looking at his stat sheet. So right. Van Noy was definitely a huge boost for them last year, and that's kind of been what the Ravens have done these last few seasons. They've always gone, I would say the last 3 to 4 seasons, they have gone into training camp in need of pass rush help. And what they do is they sign veterans off the street, maybe in the middle of training camp, or in some cases at the end of training camp. And these veterans like Justin Houston in the past have come in and been able to make an impact. I mentioned Jadeveon Clowney and Kyle Van Noy last year doing that as well. So that's kind of been their calling card. They feel like they don't have to spend top dollar at the beginning of free agency or make a massive trade to go get an elite pass rusher. They trust in their scheme. And so with Mike McDonald gone, we'll see how much that scheme is still able to present pressure without having elite pass rushers.
In the final couple of minutes that we have, I can't ignore special teams because your opera singer, Justin Tucker, and the best kicker in the league is still there. Stout's still there. But Duvernay, the all-pro kick returner, has left for Jacksonville. How are they going to work that out?
Yeah, that's going to be a competition right now. They did sign Deontay Hardy in the offseason, and he wasn't at camp. He had a baby recently, and he's got some family things going on, so he was excused from mini camp. His absence was, but the thought is that Deontay Hardy will be kind of the leading candidate to take over that Devin Duvernay role whenever he does return to the team. But I would look out for guys like Justice Hill. It's funny, I did ask John Harbaugh during minicamp. We've looked around the league and we've seen teams kind of thinking outside the box in terms of returners now with the new rules with the kickoff returns and everything. And we've heard special teams coordinators talk about how, it's now looked at as an offensive play when it comes to designing some of these plays for kickoff returns. So you could see some different guys back there. But I asked John Harbaugh, is there anybody that is out of the running of being out there? So of course he named names like Lamar Jackson. I'm surprised to hear Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers he said you won't see him back here. So, but on a serious note, guys like Justice Hill, Tylan Wallace, who won a game for them on a punt return against the Rams in overtime last year, those guys I think are going to be candidates. But it seems like it's Deontay Hardy's job to lose.
All right, Cordell, he is Cordell Woodland, the beat reporter for the Ravens at 105.7 The Fan in Baltimore. Thank you so much for your time. We'll catch up to you during the season, and enjoy the rest of the summer.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to today's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live. It's part of the Giants platforms of podcasts everywhere and Giants.com/podcast. Until next time, I'm Paul Dottino. So long, everybody.